developing, becoming quite widespread as we move through into the afternoon. A Meteorologist thunderstorm warning in force, some local disruption possible, frequent lightning, hail and some localised flooding. In between there will be some sunny spells, breezy around the coast, temperatures a little lower compared to Saturday, highs around about 20 Celsius. But for some eastern areas it will feel a little less chilly compared to Saturday. So looking at the details into the evening time, we can see plenty of showers still across central southern parts of England and Wales, some of these thundery, and then further north into northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, cloudy generally with outbreaks of rain, but still some rumbles of thunder possible in that too. And then across northern Scotland, generally a little bit drier here with some sunny spells for a time before clouding over as well. For the rest of the evening and overnight, further showery rain pushes northwards. It'll start to clear from the south, but 1 or 2 showers are still possible as we move through into the early hours, and then further blustery showers moving into the southwest later. With some clear spells around, temperatures will be a little lower, but generally for most holding up in double figures to take us into Bank Holiday Monday. So for England and Wales, a brighter start, some sunny spells, scattered showers from the word go. Further north and Northern Ireland into Scotland, generally cloudier, outbreaks of rain most persistent across western Scotland. And then generally for Monday afternoon, a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. Again, some of these could be heavy at times, some thundery as well, particularly northeast Scotland, eastern England, and temperatures around 18.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Roald Dahl once wrote, "If I had my way, I'd remove January from the calendar altogether and have an extra July instead." Well, perhaps Rishi Sunak is also a fan of that month, as he has risked all on a general election on US Independence Day. Over the next 2 hours, we will have reflections on his decision and the campaigns that it has launched, and on the announcement that the Tories would introduce a form of national service. But there will also be time in the next 2 hours to bring summer light and warmth to your Sunday with arts, culture and world affairs. Rishi Sunak surprised many of his colleagues by calling a general election in a move praised by Michael Gove for its boldness. But then Mr Gove announced that he would not be risking a Portillo moment in Surrey Heath. The campaign is underway and this Parliament has sat for the last time. An excellent political panel will discuss what we can expect over the next 6 weeks. As the conflict continues in the Middle East, the war between Israel and Hamas appears to have deepened the divide between the United States and its allies on one side and China and its partner Russia on the other. Senior UK government figures have warned that the Eastern powers are now infiltrating the West through social media and promoting pro-Palestinian influencers. To dissect the extent of their influence, we'll be joined by the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Dr Alan Mendoza. London, Madrid and Brussels are currently in talks over the creation of a common travel area between Gibraltar and Spain, which would give the ROC effective membership of the European Union's Schengen zone of passport-free movement. So Bob Neal, the Conservative MP for Bromley and Chislehurst, the chair of the Gibraltar All-Party Parliamentary Group, will share his thoughts on the post-Brexit border dilemma. And, of course, arts editor of The Express, Stefan Kyriazis, will be here to talk us through his latest theatrical adventures. We will discuss Shakespeare's Romeo being taken on by a modern-day on-screen superhero and the celebration on the West End stage of the Broadway composer whose swan songs included Hello, Dolly and La Cage aux Folles. But before all of that, your news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Thanks, Michael. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Compulsory national service for 18-year-olds will come into force if the Conservative Party wins the general election. The Prime Minister says young people will be given a choice between 12 months in the armed forces or 1 weekend a month volunteering in their community. It's hoped the scheme would help unite society in what Rishi Sunak called an increasingly uncertain world. Home Secretary James Cleverly told GB News that no one will be forced into military service.
The military bit of this will be limited to about 30,000 people. That bit will be voluntary. So the scheme overall will be compulsory, but the military bit will only be for people who volunteer to do that element of it.
Meanwhile, more people trust Sir Keir Starmer on matters of national security than the Prime Minister. That's according to a new poll by More in Common for The Telegraph. The survey also found a majority of people are not confident in Britain's ability to defend itself against threats from Russia or China. And almost half believe the next few years will be some of the most dangerous the country has ever faced. It comes after Rishi Sunak promised to increase Britain's defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. Now, the Shadow Chancellor says stabilising Britain's economy will happen with a change of government. Rachel Reeves is promising a tough set of spending rules that she says will grow the economy while keeping taxes, inflation and mortgages as low as possible. Highlighting the turmoil seen in the weeks following Liz Truss's mini-budget in 2022, Ms Reeves says the Tories haven't learnt any lessons and would repeat the same mistakes. The Conservatives say their plan is working and a Labour government would take the UK back to square one. Yellow weather warnings for thunderstorms have been extended across northern England, the Midlands, East Anglia and North East Wales. The Met Office warns slow-moving heavy showers could cause flooding and disruption in some areas. 20 to 30 millimetres of rain is expected to fall in just an hour or less in some places, with further warnings in place for parts of Scotland tomorrow. The Prince and Princess of Wales have said they are incredibly sad to hear of the death of an RAF pilot after yesterday's crash in Lincolnshire. The Spitfire was flying near RAF Coningsby when it crashed into a field just before 1:20 yesterday afternoon. In a statement, the Prince and Princess said their thoughts are with the pilot's loved ones, the Battle of Britain memorial flight and the wider RAF family. The Ministry of Defence described it as a tragic accident, while the Royal Air Force asked that the privacy of the pilot's family would be respected. To Ukraine now, where at least 4 people are dead and dozens of others injured after Russian missiles hit a crowded DIY store in Kharkiv. According to the regional governor, 16 people are still unaccounted for after the bombardments, which left a crater several metres deep. Kharkiv has been the target of Russian attacks for weeks. Despite Moscow denying that it's deliberately targeting civilians, thousands have been killed since Russia launched its invasion. Back in the UK, fans were left disappointed last night when the pop star they'd paid to see at the Co-op Live Arena in Manchester was arrested. Nicki Minaj was detained in the Netherlands after allegedly trying to take soft drugs from Schiphol Airport to another country. The 41-year-old singer of Starships and many other hits was later released after spending what she said was 5 to 6 hours in a police cell. A new date for the show is expected to be announced later today. And Richard Sherman, whose music delighted generations of Disney fans, has died at the age of 95.
Feed the birds, tuppence a bag, tuppence.
Along with his brother Robert, his music became inseparable from the mythology behind some of Disney's best-known classics. The duo won 2 Oscars for their work on the classic musical Mary Poppins. Other credits include The Jungle Book, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and the forever catchy Chin Up from Charlotte's Web. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Michael.
Thank you very much, Cameron Walker. On Wednesday, Rishi Sunak announced plans for a July the 4th general election. Did his decision suggest that things were set to get worse between now and the autumn? Or did he intend to catch the Reform Party off guard? Certainly, Nigel Farage's decision to focus more on the United States election will be a relief to many Conservative candidates. And it does seem that Farage would have been a candidate had the campaign been later in the year. So maybe that was a coup for Rishi. Revered pollsters, Professor Sir John Curtis and Lord Robert Hayward, have both noted that a party has never before come from so far behind in the polls to win a general election. To consider these matters, I have with me the former Labour advisor, Stella Santikidou. I'm sorry, I always get that
That's
messed
good enough
up.
for me.
Santikidou. Political commentator Matthew Stadlen and former advisor and chief of staff to Nadim Zahawi, James Price. Love to see you all here, and thank you, Stella, for being so tolerant. Matt, let's start with Farage. Nigel Farage has been with Camilla this morning, and it does appear, does it not, that he would have been a candidate had the election been later in the year. And this could be quite significant, could it not?
Yeah, and I was chatting to Nigel before coming on air. We know each other a little bit. I disagree with almost all of his politics, but we get on perfectly well man to man. And it seems to me that he was preparing a very serious campaign, essentially to take down the Tory party, not his words, mine, and to sort of turbocharge reform. But then Rishi Sunak turns up and shoots his goose by calling this unexpectedly early election that I certainly wasn't expecting. I thought Sunak would not want to be a one-year Prime Minister. I thought Vanity would take over. He'd want to be PM for at least 2 years. He's gone early, and this has meant that for Nigel Farage, he feels he can't have a realistic stab at winning a constituency. He doesn't feel he's got the local intel. He says that Tories and Labour have been knocking on doors for 100 years. He doesn't have that sort of information.
Yeah, I understand that. I find it a slightly curious argument because with Nigel Farage, winning a seat is neither here nor there. It's his impact on the campaign, it seems.
His argument is that he can have a greater impact if he isn't preoccupied with knocking on doors. And I mean, he may be right, but that's certainly not what the headlines in the last few days have been suggesting.
James, I put it in the commentary a moment ago that a lot of Tory candidates will be mightily relieved that Farage is not part of the deal. Do you think this is quite important?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think it goes against some of the received wisdom that this way around Farage would be able to go and campaign here and then go and jet off to America and help out the Donald, as he calls him. And if this has sort of scrambled some of Farage's plans and therefore scrambled some of Reform's plans, then maybe it will actually be worth the hits to scrambling some of the Conservatives' own plans as well.
Do you think it was a major factor in the July the 4th decision?
I do, actually. I think that if you look at the number of the votes that will be taken off Conservative candidates everywhere that Reform stands, I'm not sure they're capable of winning anywhere. They've kind of underperformed in lots of the by-elections that we've seen recently, in that they're taking decent numbers of votes. And I'm sympathetic to a lot of the stuff that they talk about, but because they haven't got the kind of infrastructure that Farage has been talking about, it's harder for them, and it's going to just hurt the Conservatives. And they're not going to have again.
It's a key point.
They're not going to have what they had in 2019, which is making some kind of pact around Brexit, which is what led in some ways to the Conservative victory being quite so good as it was, and that idea of uniting the right.
Matt apparently has a key point.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you'd come to the end of yours. No, I think you're right. I think this is... Sunak was terrified to the extent that he actually thinks he can win an election if he really does. And I mean, there are not many of us who believe that, but you never know. He was terrified of a summer in which Nigel Farage suddenly sort of spearheads reform, and then so you've got that R, and then you've got the R of Rwanda, which I think would not have worked. We'll never know probably now. And you would have had a summer of small boat crossings, and that was one of his great pledges, wasn't it? Sunak, at the beginning of last year, he was going to stop the boats. This, at the moment, looks like it's going to be a record year. So the combination of Rwanda failing, boats continuing to come, and Nigel Farage spearheading reform, I think, is why Sunak went early.
Yeah, the first 2 points do not reflect particularly to Sunak's credit. What I'm getting at, really, is that although many Conservatives have been critical of the July the 4th decision, now that we have kind of proof that it misfooted Farage, this could be very important. And many Conservative candidates may actually be more willing to accept the July 4th decision because they're going to have an easier time now that Farage is not in play. Stella, what's your reaction?
I think there is a very important point that you made there, James, about campaign infrastructure. Data is going to be very, very important, especially when you're talking about third parties. Because independent and third parties, they rely on voters who may not be super loyal to a specific party, so may not be the type of voter who always votes, but will be extra motivated to go out and vote on the day. So data is very important. I think that Nigel Farage is right. There isn't enough time for the Reform Party to have that kind of relationship with the local voters, to know where these voters are. He also made, when we had a chat with him, Matthew, he made a very important point about postal votes. Postal votes have really transformed the way people vote in the elections.
Yes.
Because especially the demographic that we know is the most likely to vote, so those above the age of 60, most of them will have signed up for a postal vote, which means that basically this is not a 6-week campaign where Nigel Farage has time to really work a constituency and find where his voters are and make sure they come out and vote. He only has 2 weeks because that's the deadline for the postal votes.
Yes. No, I think the point about postal votes is very well made, and I'm surprised it's not made more often, because the campaign goes on up to election day. But many, many voters have voted long before that their decision is made. However, I persist in my point that I don't think for Nigel winning a seat was the main point. Since we got you, Stella, I think you're quite interested to comment on some of the other candidates who may not win seats, let's put it that way. Jeremy Corbyn, what do you make of his standing in Islington North, a seat that he's represented for decades with a massive majority?
I think it's very interesting. I think it's very sad that it has ended the way it does. I find it very sad when a former leader of a party is no longer a member of the party, but it is what it is. We are where we are. I think he does have a following in his constituency, but other than that, I find it a bit manipulative when a lot of commentators are trying to make it sound as if, oh, you know, this shows that the Labour Party is still stuck to Corbyn or the far left or whatever. Jeremy Corbyn has been expelled from the Labour Party. Nobody in the Labour Party is going to spend an ounce of political capital to defend him right now, which is it's sad, but it shows to you that I think that his grip over the party is basically zero. I think the local election is going to be interesting. I think the debates are going to be interesting. Not that they will be important for the rest of the country, but I think you see the vote being fractured across the country right now in all sorts of seats with all sorts of parties, and I think this will show where the new dividing lines are. It's no longer Brexit, it's going to be other things. It's going to be immigration, it's going to be the cost of living crisis, other dividing lines.
James, viewers may be surprised that we haven't yet spoken about national service because it's kind of a big news story. But actually, I think we have a kind of exclusive on Farage here as to the fact that he would have made a different decision had the election been later. James, national service. Well, first of all, were you surprised?
It did certainly come out of left field. When I got wind of it before it was announced, I sort of thought that the person who was telling me about it was putting my leg on it. And I suspect I'll be probably alone in this panel. I think this is a great idea. Very interestingly, there was sort of the kind of hardcore libertarians, the right, who said this is indentured servitude, how dare you, all that sort of stuff. And then I had a text from a friend of mine who was in the Israeli government saying, this isn't going far enough. You know, you're going to need to do much more compulsory national service. The world's getting more dangerous. And so actually getting it somewhere in between the two, because it's not just making everybody sign up to the army. I think places are going to be capped at about 30,000. It's going to be hyper-competitive, like you're seeing in Scandinavia and increasing numbers of European countries. The French are looking at this as well. But if you're not getting into that, it's going to be a weekend a month for a year doing nice, good, wholesome activities. And given the kind of fraying nature of our social fabric, anything that makes us think that we have more in common and we should be finding purpose in serving others, rather than endlessly saying, well, as a one-legged, black, Jewish, so-and-so, whatever, any of that kind of identitarian nonsense, being together and being British and helping each other, I think that's a wonderful thing.
May I just say to James, while I've still got him, what a Conservative might say against that is, the idea may be absolutely brilliant, but it's been produced like a rabbit out of a hat. I mean, has this been prepared with the armed service? Has it been prepared with the charities? Do we know that it costs $2.5 billion, if that's the figure that they put upon it? Are we confident it's not going to fall apart? Where is this extra public expenditure going to come from? And why does the Conservative Party always seem to stand for an enlargement of the state? Now, and I think the worry is that obviously this has not been consulted with the Conservative Party. So you're going to have a lot of candidates out there, some of whom were MPs, some who were not, defending a policy into which they've had no input whatsoever.
Yeah, it's certainly a high-wire act, isn't it? But I suppose at the very least this shows that Rishi is willing to kind of take risks to try and turn the dial, which is something he hasn't really done in office to this point. And it does show at least there's some kind of debate that's to be had, and it will force perhaps Labour to come out and have some big, interesting ideas of their own. On the point about the army, of course, it was the head of the army who said in January that we're going to need to start training up more of a citizen force because the world is getting much more dangerous. And actually, we've seen from all the horrible things that have been happening in the world, what will be happening in Taiwan soon, I'm afraid, all these things, that all this kind of, how much is it going to cost, all the rest of it, will pale into insignificance if we could actually get a group of young people together who are willing to fight for this country. And let's not forget, we asked people, would you be willing to fight for your country a few months ago? And so many people said, no, why should I bother? And that's a terrifying thing.
Matt, from the electoral tactical point of view, I thought the strength of the Conservative campaign was going to be exposing Labour for 6 weeks to find out whether they had any answers to difficult questions. And I think so far, actually, Starmer has not done very well with the difficult questions. But are the Tories now going to go on distracting the electorate from finding out whether Labour has any policies or any ideas by producing policies on a weekly basis that are actually quite divisive and also expensive in public spending terms?
I think there's quite possibly a bit of concern on the left that this sort of headline-grabbing initiative gives the Tories the sense that they are actually driving the narrative, that they are in the news, that a party that's been in power for 14 years is coming up with new stuff. That said, I think this feels like throwing paint at a wall and hoping it stick. There are now going to be millions of parents around the country who think that their children are going to be forced to join the military because...
That would be inaccurate, of course.
It would be inaccurate because actually it's 30,000. Nonetheless, this idea of...
30,000 volunteers.
30,000 volunteers for the military, exactly. So you've then got this issue of a mandatory policy that is actually voluntary, and that you are then, everyone who doesn't join the military bit, they are going to be forced to volunteer, which rather goes against the idea of the voluntary ethos. Just on the Corbyn point, because I think that's quite important as well, I think that the optics are incredibly strong for Starmer. There's no doubt it's ruthless, and he gave an interview to The Telegraph recently saying that he finds it easy to be ruthless, but it is sending a message loud and clear to Tory voters that even if you don't switch to Labour, you don't have to fear me. You don't have to fear me, Keir Starmer, because I am so different from what many people see as Labour's recent toxic past. He's driven the party forward. And your other issue, your other point about Labour's policies, what really are Labour's policies, that is going to, and rightly so, come under heavy scrutiny in the next 6 weeks, because if we are going to...
It depends how many distractions there are. But let me ask Stella on that. Stella, are you concerned, from what you've seen so far, a few interviews with Keir Starmer, are you concerned that the Labour message is going to hold together. It looks to me as if they're a bit short of concrete answers.
Actually, I agree with what you said to Camilla earlier today, which is that it is quite unwise from Sunak to come up with all of these dead cat policies, you know, where you throw the dead cat on the table and everyone looks at that and forgets about everything else, because he should have left the airspace for Keir Starmer to fill it with whatever it is that he's trying to say, and then attack him about the fact that he hasn't put enough meat on the bones on the policies. So I think that, for once again, shows you the strategic errors in Sunak's judgment.
Very interesting. A dead cat and meat on the bones. Lots to think about there. Stella Santikidou, Matthew Stadlin and James Price, thank you to all of you. After the break, I'll be speaking to Dr. Alan Mendoza of the Henry Jackson Society, as government officials have suggested that Russia and China are using social media to influence those in the West to support Palestine as the Middle East conflict rages on.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Emma, let's start, shall we, with Prince William confirming on the Isles of Scilly yesterday that Kate is doing well. I thought it was a very brave lady to say, "We're allowed to ask how the Princess of Wales is," and I thought, well, we're not, so good for you.
Yeah. One of the hospitals he visited on the Isles of Scilly, an administrator, a hospital administrator, asked him how Kate was doing, and he said, "She's doing well, thanks."
Until we hear official word from the palace, then we're just going to have to rely on little snippets like this.
It does seem to be serious. So
It does.
We wish her
What's
very
quite
best.
telling as well, I went through some of the social media comments on this, and people that live on the Isle of Scilly were just like saying how close they got, how wonderful it was. He's supporting local businesses. And that pasty shop will now be like treasured, you know, forever. That people forever go there.
On the Quay. It sounds great. It's called On the Quay.
Compare and contrast with this I feel at home in Nigeria vibe that Meghan's putting out. Two very, very different takes on how to be a royal.
Do they want to be royals or do they not? Because they seem to want sort of half the trappings but without all the kind of responsibilities.
These two brothers, who obviously went through a lot growing up, obviously can't stand the sight of each other right now, and it's just really sad.
Well, it goes beyond the brothers. I mean, we are told from some of the papers this morning that the King didn't have time in his schedule to see his son because he was actually meeting David Beckham for a private meeting.
Well, who would you choose?
All about priorities.
I mean, I know who
It's all about priorities.
But, you know, you'd surely, I mean, you could just pop in as well. I reckon that Harry and Bex are pals, probably. So what's gone on there, and will they ever be able to repair things?
And they really were so close. I mean, when you compare the Buckingham Palace garden party, a couple of miles down the road, literally Harry was at Westminster or wherever it was. It wasn't far. And it absolutely would have been possible for him to go.
3 miles apart, and yet absolutely worlds apart in terms of their emotional state.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the programme. It's reported that senior British government figures believe that Russia and China are manipulating public opinion about the Israel-Hamas conflict. Whitehall sources have revealed that analysis proves that some of the leading pro-Palestinian social media influencers in the United Kingdom have drawn popularity and larger followings courtesy of fake accounts. One theory is that Russia aims to divert attention and outrage away from its invasion of Ukraine by focusing minds on the war in Gaza. Well, is there proof of social media manipulation by foreign powers, and how concerned should we be? I'm joined now by the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Dr. Alan Mendoza. Thank you so much for coming in on a Sunday morning. Well, those are my questions. Is it provable that foreign hostile powers are influencing, and is it provable that they're influencing to stimulate support for the Palestinian side in the Gaza conflict?
Well, when we talk about proof, it is not 100% cast iron, here is a line going to the Kremlin, out provable. But it is obvious, judging by the tactics we've seen time and time again. This is not the first rodeo, as it were, in this regard. We have seen Russia operating bot factories, i.e. these fake accounts that you just mentioned, that pop up, put out lies, and then spread lies as well by just retweeting things. And you have hundreds of thousands, millions of these accounts out there that are promoting matters. The Chinese have a slightly different approach. They have their whole disinformation factory on one social media outlet called TikTok. TikTok, as you know, is run by a Chinese company. There is a lot of suspicion about how closely it works with the Chinese Communist Party. And it is notable, isn't it, Michael, that you don't see a single bit of criticism of China anywhere on TikTok, but you see plenty of criticism of the West and things that will cause social discord in the West. So there are questions about how the algorithm works there, and obviously the suspicion is that it is favouring a certain side and argument.
So social disruption appears to be one motivation. Tell me what role you think the Palestinian question plays for Russia and for China in manipulating public opinion in the UK?
It's a very important question, and as you've again already suggested, part of it on the Russian front, the Russian idea is this distracts from the horrors of Ukraine. If we can show a lot of fake news in particular about what's going on in Israel, Gaza, that brings everyone into, if you like, into line. We're no longer the moral bad guys, everyone's a bad guy, and, you know, you need to take us out of that sort of equation. So you see the Russian side looking very much at how can we distract, but also, and in common with the Chinese side, what they do like doing is fostering social discord, destroying social cohesion. And for them, any issue, any wedge issue that can cause large amounts of consternation, bring people out onto the streets, create division between neighbours, as it were, and harm, if you like, the equilibrium of a country, that is a good thing as far as they're concerned. And that is why they are pushing this issue. They see it as doing, in Russia's case, 2 issues, in China's case, 1 issue, but both help their strategic position vis-à-vis the West.
It's interesting that we're talking in a morning when we're getting these devastating pictures out of Kharkiv of this destruction of this DIY store with a terrible death rate. And maybe it is true that we haven't been as focused on what Russia has been doing in Ukraine in recent times. So social dissent in general, where are the other areas that they will operate, do you think? Or the other areas in which they are already operating, do you think?
You mean on social media or in general?
No, I was thinking of social media, but if you've got other things to say, tell me.
Well, the social media side, like I said, it's about creating the most noise and distraction techniques, basically. So if the more outrageous a statement, the better as far as they're concerned, because it drives outrage politics, emotion. And let's not forget, Michael, the key to this is that social media often, in today's world, is based on emotional responses. You see a picture, a damage of some kind, you see dead bodies. That's going to cause a powerful emotional response. And often people get caught up, if you like, in that and don't think about what they're seeing and whether it's actually true or not. And I think in this sense, we need to make a distinction between disinformation, which is lies purposely put out by, say, foreign powers, and then misinformation, which is ordinary people being horrified by something, not checking the facts out, and then sharing the disinformation. So in a sense, you're seeing a ripple effect that goes on, not on the social media side. On the other side, though, we're also, of course, seeing espionage techniques of various kinds. We have seen, on the Chinese case, loads of attempts to grab data from the UK. We've seen attacks on MPs' accounts. We've seen attacks on the Electoral Commission. We saw the recent sort of suggestions that China has been active in hacking the military. What is China trying to do with this data? It wants to know things about us. And that's also the problem with social media and beyond on the hacking side. If foreign powers can get hold of important information about you, whether it is stuff you voluntarily give them or stuff they have managed to hack, that gives them an insight into what people here are thinking, what their lives are like, and they can use that to manipulate us.
The student protests have a little bit dropped out of the headlines very recently, but they were on both sides of the Atlantic. They were pretty fearsome over in the United States. Did you track a connection between Russia and China and those demonstrations.
Well, yes, again, it's very interesting. Those have been heavily promoted, it would seem, by the same sorts of Russian and Chinese action that we were talking about earlier. We've seen, obviously, the spread of those, kind of narratives across social media. We have seen also, the sense that, they're doing a moral right in this sense, again, coming out across various different channels. But I think what's interesting about those aspects, particularly in the US, is that a lot of their, if you like, funding, and it was an organised campaign, by the way, it wasn't something that sort of sprang up, spontaneously. A lot of money was being pumped in, this time by liberal leftist foundations, large foundations. People like George Soros, the Rockefeller foundations, were actually funding a lot of this stuff. And it tells you that there is, sort of, if you like, a homegrown constituency for this sort of activity as much as what other countries can take advantage of. And again, I'm not for a moment suggesting that those groups are in league with Russia and China. They're not. But they are, to use the Marxist phrase, useful idiots for what Russia and China would like to do to us.
Should we worry about the integrity of our election result when we get it? One of the virtues of our country, I suppose, is that we still vote on paper. And I suppose it's much more difficult, actually, to influence the generation of the result if it's on paper rather than electronic. In many other countries, it would be electronic. So if you try to influence an election in this country, is it not by manipulating the result, but by manipulating the campaign?
That is absolutely the case. I mean, there is no way you're going to be able to sort of sneak in loads of vote bundles to change a result. However, you can do lots, can't you, in that campaign to influence things. So on the one hand, you can push out messages, narratives that suit whatever you would like to see the result to be. And you can also, frankly, as we know, we've seen the creation of significant and important deep fakes, false video clips, false audio clips that look and sound very much like the real thing. I mean, what happens in the week before the election, Michael, if one of two things happen? Rishi Sunak is, allegedly caught off camera saying he plans X or Y policy going there. Well, it's very difficult for anyone to react, isn't there, in such short time? And if it's 2 days before an election, that could happen. Or what happens if someone then, does another claim, Keir Starmer pinched my bottom 5 years ago or something like that? Once again, it beggars belief that we could be in a situation where in the week of the election, with no time for the legitimate reality to emerge, lies can come out and be spread. And these are getting very sophisticated, the deepfakes, and there's great concern in the security services about the potential for disruption in this way.
Yes, and if I understand you correctly, it's not that Russia would want either Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak to win, one rather than the other. It's just that disruption and the promotion of disbelief in the system is what they're up to.
Absolutely correct. There's no evidence that our foreign, if you like, competitors would like either of the parties in. But there is a sense, I think, that they would like to create as much consternation, as much discord, as much turmoil within society. Anything that could lead to the election result being, if you like, sort of dampened by the idea that it was somehow won by stealth would achieve that.
Most interesting. Thank you very much, Ana Mendoza. Coming up, we'll be looking at why Spain and Britain could once again be at loggerheads over post-Brexit borders. I'll be joined by Sir Bob Neill, the chairman of the Gibraltar All-Party Parliamentary Group, for his diagnosis on the matter.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The Eurovision, according to figures out this morning, had its most disastrous night to date because viewing figures were down by 2.5 million.
So the BBC had a drag queen on telling everyone that she was boycotting it.
Who was boycotting it?
Someone called Crystal, who came on the Newsnight to say that she was boycotting her North London party because of Israel. So maybe that's why the figures are down.
They cancelled some Eurovision parties in gay bars in
Yes,
Soho
exactly. So I wonder whether that's what did it.
North London party.
I think the whole of Dalston basically not tuning in is what's caused this massive drop in ratings because of the whole controversy around Israel. I have to say, a lot of those performers needed to go and see a hygienist. I mean, that man who was the Irish entry, who's supposed to be a satanic witch. She does pop witchery or something.
She screeched.
And she screeched a lot, and then took her clothes off. Yeah. And then there was a sort of devil man who was gyrating around her, who obviously hadn't cleaned his teeth in years.
That was the vodka break.
Okay, fine.
That was the vodka break. When I went and got.
And I thought the Israeli entry. I mean, I didn't really like the song. I liked her dress.
But I just voted for it because
I thought the choreography was
I hated
awful.
the way she was
you know,
besieged in a hotel room.
But I did also think that the Ukraine entry was quite interesting because I know that the Israeli entry got into trouble for referencing the October 7th attacks, and she had to sort of rewrite her stuff because you're not allowed to mention the war or anything like that, which is fine. But then the Ukraine entry was very war. I mean, they had kind of gunfire coming in over her.
The whole thing, there was double standards.
There was quite a lot of that,
I mean, the people outside, the queers of Palestine...
We're going to carry on paying for it, though, because, I mean, the BBC pays the lion's share of it. That's us.
Yeah.
And we do spectacularly every year.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives. Again, down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. For months, the European Union and Britain have discussed the management of Gibraltar's border following Brexit. Proposals have been made for the European Union officials to carry out immigration controls at Gibraltar's airport, and the passports of all travellers will be checked. The Foreign Secretary David Cameron insists that it will not diminish the UK's sovereignty. Should British visitors to British territory be showing their passports to European Union officials? Will Gibraltar be rocked by these proposals? Joining me now is Sir Bob Neal, Conservative Member of Parliament for Bromley and Chislehurst and Chair of the Gibraltar All-Party Parliamentary Group. Bob, very good to see you. Hello.
Good to see you, Michael. Good to see you again.
Actually, just bringing this up to date, I was reading in the newspaper today a statement from Madrid. It says that the Policía Nacional, the national police, must carry out border controls. If Frontex agents are there, they're the ones from the EU, their role should be to support and complement the Spanish National Police. And then it says the Spanish police must serve in uniform and would carry weapons while performing their duties. Gosh, it rather sounds as if we are giving up some sovereignty in Gibraltar.
Well, I think a long experience has shown that the Spaniards quite often put out quite hardline bargaining positions, which aren't then followed through in practice. And as you know, Michael, there's a bit of political gamesmanship goes on in Spain, particularly with the fairly fragile current coalition government, and on the other hand, the quite nationalist attitude adopted by some of the Partido Popular and by Vox. So I think there's a bit of positioning there. The key thing is to keep the negotiations going, because the deal really is important for the future viability of Gibraltar, both economically and socially. But not, of course, at any cost. That's the thing. Not at any cost.
You're absolutely right about political manoeuvring in Spain, and I think Gibraltar has been cursed by the fact that whenever Britain and Spain have got close to agreement over Gibraltar, some political party in Spain has seen the advantage of beating the war drum again, and it's all gone back to square one. Now, the people of Gibraltar, and we are very concerned with their views, and we think they should have a right to decide their future. They voted 96% to remain in the European Union. So what do the people of Gibraltar, or at least their leaders at the moment, think? What kind of an outcome do they want from this?
The most important thing is for Gibraltar to have a free-flowing land border with Spain. The bulk of its economy now is based upon financial services and tourism. It's changed a lot since the days of the border closures under Franco, when it was largely a dockyard and garrison town economy. And to sustain that, about 15,000 plus people come across that border every day. So it's vital that we have that flowing. Now, the difference that Gibraltar has, for example, with Northern Ireland, which is the only other British territory really that has a land border with an EU country, is that Gibraltar, unlike the UK and Ireland, does not have a common travel area. As you know, there was a common travel area between Britain and Ireland, which long predated either as being in the EU or the EU existing. So it doesn't have the benefit of that. And secondly, unlike the Irish Republic, Spain is in Schengen. That's the external frontier within which there are very few border controls. So we've got to have a means of having a free-flowing border with not just with Spain, but with the Schengen area of which Spain is part. So that's where there have to be controls, but obviously you can't have a situation of armed Spanish police people on British territory. I think the better route will be, Michael, something like the juxtaposed controls that you have at Dover or at St Pancras on the Eurostar terminal, where there's a small carve-out where people are checked going in, but nobody's saying that compromises sovereignty. That's the thing we've got to try and aim for.
The arrangements you talk about between us and France, of course, are not in the context of being within Schengen.
No.
Is it accepted either by the Gibraltarians or by the British government, or indeed by your committee, that Gibraltar should either factually or as a matter of practice be within Schengen?
Ultimately, the decision for that, in my judgment, must be for the people of Gibraltar. As you rightly say, they were left, I think, in the most exposed position of almost any part of the British family by the Brexit decision. And that is reflected in the two juxtaposed referendum results, isn't it? Yeah, 99% to stay in the EU, pretty much 99% to remain British in a previous referendum as well. So what I think we've got to do, and what the APPG on a cross-party basis tries to do, is to encourage any government to do its level best to reconcile those positions, basically. And that's why getting the free-flowing frontier is important. That does mean looking at what we do about the airport, as you know, Michael, because that's the main point of entry. And there is probably a sensible solution here with a bit of give and take that doesn't impact on sovereignty. Clearly, there are certain red lines that we have to have about the primacy of British law enforcement within a British territory. And of course, as I'm absolutely certain David Cameron has already obtained, guarantees of no interference with the Ministry of Defence operations with the airport, the port, etc. I think we're OK on that, but it's these other controls that's perhaps the big issue.
You sound as if you're very trusting of David Cameron. I think Bill Cash was saying that he's very worried that now that the election has been called and you're all going to cease to be members of Parliament very shortly, that this is a moment when the British government might move forward with these negotiations at a time when there cannot be any parliamentary scrutiny. Does that bother you?
I don't think it's a problem. I'm sorry to say, Bill, who I've worked with in the Commons for many years, sometimes agrees, sometimes agrees, has got this one completely wrong. I think he and his committee, his colleagues, are looking at conspiracies where none exist. I've met Cameron on a number of occasions to talk about this, as I have the other ministers. He has engaged very closely with the Gibraltar government. The Gibraltar government, the chief minister, Gibraltar officials are embedded in the negotiating team. Nothing's being done behind Gibraltar's back. And the key test for me is no UK government, having a duty of care to the people of Gibraltar, should try and obstruct a deal which the people of Gibraltar, through their elected representatives, are happy with. Now, ideally, of course, we'd not want this to be happening against the background of a UK general election, given the instability of the Spanish government as well. But on the other hand, as we know, treaties are dealt with under the royal prerogative, and if the right deal came along, then you shouldn't waste time to seize it. And what I think is important to remember is that both the main political parties, I think all the main UK political parties, are signed up to a deal for Gibraltar. So if anybody in Spain thought that trying to play off the Conservatives against Labour or an overall majority against a hung parliament would help their cause, they're wrong on that. Whatever the outcome of the UK election, we're determined to get a deal which doesn't compromise British sovereignty over Gibraltar, because that's what the Gibraltar people want.
Thank you very much, Sir Bob Neill. Sir Bob Neill, MP for the time being. I might take this opportunity to wish you well in your future outside Parliament.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's very kind. Good to see you again. All the best.
Thank you, Bob Neill. Still ahead, it's nearly time to offer the stage to Stefan Kyriazis to hear all about his escapades, his latest outings into the auditorium of London theatres.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather. The day ahead is going to be unsettled. We'll see heavy showers, some thundery downpours as well, but there will be some sunshine. This morning, though, it's a cloudy start across much of the UK. Outbreaks of rain pushing northwards, but it will brighten up from the south. But we will see heavy showers developing, becoming quite widespread as we move through into the afternoon. A Met Office thunderstorm warning in force, some local disruption possible, frequent lightning, hail and some localised flooding. In between there will be some sunny spells, breezy around the coast, temperatures a little lower compared to Saturday, highs around about 20 Celsius. But for some eastern areas it will feel a little less chilly compared to Saturday. So looking at the details into the evening time, we can see plenty of showers still across central southern parts of England and Wales, some of these thundery, and then further north into northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, cloudy generally with outbreaks of rain, but still some rumbles of thunder possible in that too. And then across northern Scotland, generally a little bit drier here with some sunny spells for a time before clouding over as well. For the rest of the evening and overnight, further showery rain pushes northwards. It'll start to clear from the south, but one or two showers are still possible as we move through into the early hours, and then further blustery showers moving into the southwest later. With some clear spells around, temperatures will be a little lower, but generally for most holding up in double figures to take us into Bank Holiday Monday. So for England and Wales, a bright start, some sunny spells, scattered showers from the word go. Further north and Northern Ireland into Scotland, generally cloudier, outbreaks of rain most persistent across western Scotland. And then generally for Monday afternoon, a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. Again, some of these could be heavy at times, some thundery as well, particularly northeast Scotland, eastern England, and temperatures around 18.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Tom Holland is playing Romeo at the Duke of York's Theatre in London. The man who was playing Billy Elliot in the theatre in 2008 is back on stage after a few years of being on screen as Spider-Man. Stefan Kyriazis was there to see him treading the boards once more. What did you make of him and it?
Yes, well, this is an event theatre. He's back as a massive film star now. Tickets sold out, I think, in an hour or something. The hottest ticket in town. It's very much for the young people. It's very much an experience. We've got a little kind of clippy thing just to give you a bit of an idea. Yeah. So this is
clippy thing was the right description.
This is the kind of, but it does. This is the tone. So that music is what you hear when you go in. It's all very dark. There's a complete blackout. The whole crowd screams because they're all Tom Holland fans. And then we get the prologue, which is fine. And this is Jamie Lloyd, who did Sunset Boulevard with Nicole Scherzinger. He did Cyrano with James McAvoy, which I loved. And it was so much simpler. I think he's a little bit like the Matrix films. The first one was rather wonderful and refreshing and different, and then this got more and more bloated, convoluted, complicated, too intricate, and he's literally thrown all of his tricks at this. So handheld cameras, when Romeo gets sent into exile, he's on the roof of the theatre. When we go to the Capulet party, we don't really see it. We just see them up on the big screen, and they're in the hotel's foyer. And it's kind of amusing, but it always breaks the wall for me, and I'm not a big fan. And there's this problem which keeps happening, including with Sarah Snook's Dorian Gray, where people are right there on the stage, but often with their backs to us or obstructed, being filmed so that we can look at them on a screen. Yeah. And this is a problem for me, and very much so.
And it's such a popular technique at the moment.
It's Jamie Lloyd to a T, but we have a lot of mic stands, so there's a point when 4 of them are lined up at the microphones, and a lot of it is declaimed to us, not to each other, which is a real problem for me. They just look like a very kind of Asbo boy band to me. And there's a lot of whispering, which seems to make it exciting, but it's embarrassingly awful. And I think another critic said it's just whisper, whisper, shout. Tom Holland is charismatic. He wears his emotions all over his face. It's glorious. And I have to say, Francesca Amadua Rivers got a lot of flack as when she was cast. She's luminous. She acts with her whole body and her voice. She's glorious. When they're together facing each other, it's beautiful. The balcony scene is glorious. By contrast, the death scene is terrible. And I just spent a lot of it frustrated. You can see there's potential. Didn't work for me. The people that go are going to love it. It's a real divider. So exciting, but I think enough already. Jamie Lloyd needs to do something very different, please.
Well, viewers should probably not fret too much, because if they don't have a ticket already, they don't stand much chance of getting one. Do you want to tell us about Jerry's Girls, and who is the Jerry in the title?
Jerry is Jerry Herman, very, very famous Broadway writer, composer. And this was a show that was put together in the 80s, and it started as a small kind of cabaret-ish review show of just his greatest songs, loosely linked. Then it went to Broadway proper. Now it's come back and it's at the Meunier Chocolate Factory, and it's pared much more down into cabaret. So just 3 actresses. Cassidy Jansen is one of them, who I absolutely love. And it's a rollout of songs like Bosom Buddies or I Am What I Am from Kajal Fall. And it's very much, we start with them in their changing room, just sat at their mirrors, and it's all very, very simple. And then they scurry around, the red curtains close, and they're in front. So it's sort of like hoofing showgirls, working, going backstage. The songs backstage are much more tender, a little bit more emotional. If you just want to see 3 glorious performers with glorious voices doing some fantastic songs, and some songs I didn't know, which were really rather lovely. It's a very small show, but they milk it for the comedy and for the pathos. And I thought it was rather lovely. So that's one, is the absolute opposite. That's for traditionalists, for people that love a cozy kind of musical in the old-fashioned sense. And then the final one we've got is Passing Strange, which is kind of a musical, but it's looping us back to Romeo and Juliet, which was very much, ultimately, I thought, performance art at the audience, as is Passing Strange. And we've got a clip here from the show.
Well, before we got it back to your uptown flat, you're gonna do a little pay since you paid for that. A play where this band tells you where it's at.
It's fabulous. It's so much fun. So this was written in 2008, and it's very much a black middle-class teenager's story when he's trying to discover himself and actually doesn't really feel terribly black. But he's also a very navel-gazing teenager. So Giles Terera, who we saw there, who was incredible in Hamilton, is his older self come narrator. And again, very much to the audience. You've got 3 multi-instrumentalists on stage, all of who are incredible on the electric guitar. Drum kit out the back, 4 backing singers who take out all the other roles, and then just the older and younger version of the main character. And he eventually heads off to Europe to find himself, and he goes to Amsterdam, which is all about free love, and then he finds love and he's just not ready for it, which becomes the theme. And he moves on to Berlin, which is, it's very cliched and cartoony. They've all got kind of punk Mohicans and they're all doing performance art. And it's very anti-establishment. So there's a lot of comedy. His first sex scene is very amusing, but it's beautifully done. The musicians are incredible. The singers are incredible. The performers are great. And it's a weird one that Romeo and Juliet, there's so much depth to it, but I thought it skimmed the surface. This one's a little bit superficial, actually, but somehow had more depth. And I recommend that. That's at the Young Vic to July the 6th, and it's fun.
Very, very good. Well, thank you very much, Stefan Kyriazis. You are watching GB News, Britain's news channel. That concludes the first hour of the programme. Please don't go away. We'll be back after the break. We'll be tackling the twists and turns of the upcoming general election, the world's reaction to the Iranian president's death, and we'll be assessing the party's stances on gender recognition. And we'll finish up with some baked goods, because we have to have a Taste of Britain segment in our show. Come back soon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, for the rest of today, it's going to be a pretty mixed picture. Many of us seeing some further rain and showers, but there'll be some sunshine in between, all courtesy of this area of low pressure, and unfortunately it's not going to go very far during the rest of this bank holiday weekend, maintaining a rather unsettled theme. So for the rest of this afternoon, many of us seeing some rain and showers. The showers heavy in places, risk of thunder. There are various warnings in force from the Met Office as we go throughout the course of today. In any sunshine, though, it won't feel too bad out there, especially across the south. We'll see highs here reaching around 19 or 20 degrees. So into this evening, across Scotland, we see a rather cloudy and damp picture, especially across more northern areas. Further south, maybe a few brighter spells to end the day, but here we see the risk of some thundery downpours, so there are warnings as we go through the course of the evening. Northern Ireland also seeing the risk of a few thundery downpours, similar across parts of England and Wales, but across the south, the showers should start to begin to fade away as we head towards the end of the evening. So going into the rest of the night, many parts of England and Wales turning a bit drier and clearer, where across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland remaining quite cloudy here with some further outbreaks of rain. In the clearer skies, we may well just see temperatures fall into single figures, but further north generally staying above 10 degrees. So we start bank holiday Monday off on a fairly bright and sunny note across eastern and central parts of England. Elsewhere, plenty of cloud around and still some outbreaks of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Showers developing further south too, but these should be a little bit lighter compared to today. The main focus of any heavy and thundery rain will be across the far northeast of Scotland. Temperatures around average for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking? Not a line, what is it? I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me. This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and welcome to the second hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo on GB News. I hope that you will spend the next hour of this early summer's day with me as Rishi Sunak surprised most of us by calling a general election on Thursday the 4th of July. The former Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Vince Cable, and the former Labour Minister Bill Rammell will share their thoughts on the upcoming campaigns. Following the death of the controversial Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi last week, we'll be joined by the Iranian human rights activist Lily Mu for her thoughts on the varied reaction to that death. What part will trans issues play in the election? The CAS report into NHS clinics offering treatment to young people brought about numerous adjustments of political positions. Reports suggest that Labour plans to make it easier to change gender by allowing a single-family doctor to sign off on the decision. Feminist and author Julie Bindel will be here to share her thoughts on that. And finally, we'll mark World Baking Day, which took place earlier this week, by enjoying baked delights with Asha Budvig, the director of Lola's Cupcakes. All of that ahead, but first, the latest news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Michael, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Compulsory national service for 18-year-olds will come into force if the Conservative Party wins the general election. The Prime Minister says young people will be given a choice between 12 months in the armed forces or 1 weekend a month volunteering in their community. It's hoped the scheme would help unite society in what Rishi Sunak called an increasingly uncertain world. Home Secretary James Cleverly told GB News that no one will be forced into military service.
The military bit of this will be limited to about 30,000 people. That bit will be voluntary. So the scheme overall will be compulsory, but the military bit will only be for people who volunteer to do that element of it.
Well, the new scheme, which comes on the first weekend of election campaigning, has sparked a mixed reaction from voters.
It's a good enough idea, yes. It is a good enough idea.
I wouldn't want to do that, really.
I've got a 15 and a 17-year-old, so I wouldn't want them to go myself.
I think it's a good thing, because there isn't a lot of stuff for 18-year-olds to do.
People should be allowed to do what they want to do, not be bullied into doing something that they don't want to.
Some of them need a lesson in life, don't they?
Meanwhile, more people trust Sir Keir Starmer on matters of national security than the Prime Minister. That's according to a new poll by More in Common for The Telegraph. The survey also found a majority of people are not confident in Britain's ability to defend itself against threats from Russia or China, and almost half believe the next few years will be some of the most dangerous the country has ever faced. It comes after Rishi Sunak promised to increase Britain's defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. Now, the Shadow Chancellor says stabilising Britain's economy will happen with a change of government. Rachel Reeves is promising a tough set of spending rules that she says will grow the economy while keeping taxes, inflation and mortgages as low as possible. Highlighting Liz Truss's turbulent mini-budget in 2022, Miss Reeves says the Tories haven't learnt any lessons and would repeat the same mistakes. The Conservatives say their plan is working, however, and a Labour government would take the UK back to square one. Yellow warnings are in place, with thunderstorms being extended across northern England, the Midlands, East Anglia and north-east Wales. The Met Office warns slow-moving heavy showers could cause flooding and disruption in some areas. 20 to 30 millimetres of rain is expected to fall in just an hour or less in some places, with further warnings in place for parts of Scotland tomorrow. The Prince and Princess of Wales have said they are incredibly sad to hear of the death of an RAF pilot after yesterday's crash in Lincolnshire. The Spitfire was flying near RAF Coningsby when it crashed into a field just before 1:20 yesterday afternoon. In a statement, the Prince and Princess said their thoughts are with the pilot's loved ones, the Battle of Britain memorial flight and the wider RAF family. The Ministry of Defence described it as a tragic accident, while the Royal Air Force asked that the privacy of the pilot's family is respected. To Ukraine now, where at least 4 people are dead and dozens of others injured after Russian missiles hit a crowded DIY store in Kharkiv. According to the regional governor, 16 people are still unaccounted for after the bombardment, which left a crater several metres deep. Kharkiv has been the target of Russian attacks for weeks. Despite Moscow denying that it's deliberately targeting civilians, thousands have been killed since Russia launched its invasion. Now, fans were left disappointed last night when the pop star they'd paid to see at the Co-op Live Arena in Manchester was arrested. Nicki Minaj was detained in the Netherlands after allegedly trying to take soft drugs from Schiphol Airport to another country. The 41-year-old singer of Starships and many other hits was later released after spending what she said was 5 to 6 hours in a police cell. She told fans gathered outside her hotel that she'd announced a new date for the show later today. And Richard Sherman, whose music delighted generations of Disney fans, has died at the age of 95.
Feed the birds, tuppence a bag, tuppence.
Along with his brother Robert, his music became inseparable from the mythology behind some of Disney's best-known classics. The duo won 2 Oscars for their work of the classic musical Mary Poppins. Other credits include The Jungle Book, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and the forever catchy Chin Up from Charlotte's Web. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Michael.
Thank you very much, Cameron Walker. Rishi Sunak has called a general election for July the 4th, and all parties are beginning their campaigns. When the Prime Minister told his cabinet that he would hold a surprise election, he immediately won the effusive support of his Housing Minister, Michael Gove, but others have been more critical, and Mr Gove has decided not to be a candidate in the election. To discuss what we can expect over the next 6 weeks, I'm joined now by the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Vince Cable, who was a senior minister in the coalition, and by former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Welcome to you both. Vince, may I start with you? During the campaign, broadcasters are obliged to give prominence to all the parties that are contesting the election. But I have a feeling that otherwise we wouldn't be talking much about the Liberal Democrats. They don't seem to have much of a profile at the moment. Can you put me right on that?
Well, it's difficult to have a profile when you have a relatively small number of MPs, that's why Ed Davey's concentrating his campaign on building up our representation in Parliament. And we have, I think, roughly 30 target seats. And given the unpopularity of the Conservatives in the parts of the country which we're active in, that's an achievable target. I mean, there is a fundamental dissatisfaction with the government, and there are many parts of the country where Lib Dems are the alternative. And I think there you see the Lib Dems being very active on the ground, if not in the media. That will change if we once again become the third party in Parliament, overtaking the Scottish Nationalists in the number of MPs. I think you'll see that.
But you've rather put your finger on what I think is the point, which is, yes, the Liberal Democrats may do quite well, because there may be a feeling that some people want to get rid of their Conservative Member of Parliament. Even if they're Labour voters, they'll maybe do a bit of tactical voting and see whether they can get rid of the Tory by letting in the Liberal Democrat. But none of that says anything about the virtues of the Liberal Democrats. Well, what would be the reasons for voting Liberal Democrat?
Well, I think the first is a negative one, which you've just put your finger on. The government are desperately unpopular, and in many parts of the country, we're the people who can act as the midwife to get rid of them. And that may be negative, but that's very important. I think the second, we have had experience in government recently. I think, stable, sensible government, which was thrown away in 2015. A lot of experience in local government, often very successfully. And I think you'll find an attractive array of policies in the manifesto when it appears.
Let's try you on that one. If the Liberal Democrats won the election, which seems quite unlikely, Britain would change in the following way. Please complete.
I think it will change in the sense that we will initially support many of the things which the Labour Party are planning to do in government by concentrating on building up public services, albeit within the constraints of public finance. We will want to repair our relations with Europe. We're not talking about rejoining the European Union in the near future, but we want to rebuild constructive relationships and concentrate on having a genuinely liberal approach, which has often been thrown away in recent years, measures to curb the rights to protest, things of this kind, where a liberal voice is important.
Is it illiberal to think of bringing in national service?
Not necessarily. I think, we should look at that. There are probably good elements to it. What I'm surprised by is that having had Conservatives in government for 14 years, that this idea is suddenly popping up. I mean, why? I mean, you've been a former Defence Secretary yourself. There's a shortage of national service personnel, but you don't solve that problem by bringing in sullen 18-year-olds. That's not the way to deal with a kind of high-tech military. So it seems to be a bit of a desperate gesture, but we shouldn't be negative. Let's look at it. Let's see what can be retrieved from it.
Very, very interesting. Please stay with us, Vince, as I turn to Bill Rammell. Bill, I'm quite surprised to hear Vince's reaction to the national service idea there. Are you equally willing to discuss this proposal?
No, I'm massively sceptical. Frankly, I think it's an act of desperation. The military aren't going to be up for it. Integrating reluctant 18-year-olds into the military, it's a pitch to the Tory core vote, the over 65s who are attracted by reform, who might find this attractive.
Will it be a successful pitch then? Is that what you're saying?
It might be to some people who were tempted to move to reform, may come back to the Tories, but I don't think it's going to be a game changer. And I think for young people, if there's been one theme of the last 14 years, it's actually intergenerational unfairness. The elderly have been protected in terms of benefits, in terms of pensions, whilst young people have been hit with, lack of housing, increased tuition fees, and much more. Now the Tories, at the fag end of 14 years, are saying they're going to hit young people by compulsory conscription. Although listening to James Cleverly this morning, it doesn't seem as though it's going to be compulsory. So, it's unravelling as we speak.
No, it's clearly not compulsory conscription. There are 30,000 places for people voluntarily to go into the armed forces. And the compulsion is that you volunteer one weekend a month.
Which you're not going to be paid for.
For a charity or whatever. Yes, but you say it's hitting young people. I mean, might it not be developmental for them? Might it not be a way of improving them and finishing them? I mean, working for a charity is not hitting someone, it's helping them to develop, isn't it?
I'll tell you what would be developmental is giving more people, young people, access to apprenticeships. The numbers have fallen from 131,000 to 77,000 under this government, and more access to higher education. That's what we should be pushing in developmental terms. But I really don't think this will be popular. I really don't think it stacks up. And I think it is an act of desperation, pitching to the core vote, when, to have any chance of victory, the Tories need to be returning to the centre ground.
One of my criticisms of it is that it risks diverting attention away from Labour. And my view is that Keir Starmer, in some of his early interviews, has looked quite uncomfortable under questioning about the precise details of his policies. And if I were the Tories, I would probably leave the focus there rather than inventing new policies every day that distract. But do you feel that Keir Starmer has looked safe on his feet, defending his policies and the details of those policies in the opening days of the campaign?
I think he has. You might say I would say that, wouldn't I? But it's, you know, I am genuinely objective and criticise when it's necessary. But it's only been 3 or 4 days. I think the scrutiny will come as we flesh out the manifesto and publish that. And then I'm confident that we do have the answers that people are needing. But I have to say, Michael, I've been shocked by the start of this general election campaign. You know, Rishi Sunak surprised not only the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, the Commentariat, but most of his own MPs by going on July the 4th. And it has been the most shockingly incompetent start to an election campaign that I can remember. And, you know, we've now got a scattergun of announcements like this National Service initiative. I'm not sure that's serving the Tory party's interests.
I hope, Vince, you're still there down the line, are you?
Yes, I am.
Good. Tell me, how do you... You've told me that there are good reasons to vote Liberal Democrat, and probably the best is, from your point of view, to get rid of the Tories. But how do you see the Liberal Democrats entering into this campaign, being a bit more visible than they are today? Do you think the Liberal Democrats will have some policy surprises? How is it that they're going to be part of the debate?
Well, I think the priorities Ed Davies set out, which are centring on the NHS, which is a major national concern, and where we had experience in government trying to refocus attention on preventive health and mental health. I think you'll hear that again and how it can be done. And on cost of living issues, and they're the big issue, which also an incoming Labour government can face, is how to raise revenue. You know, we've had the Institute of Fiscal Studies saying simply to stabilise the public finance, we probably need the equivalent of something like 5p in the pound of income tax, which nobody's going to campaign on. So there is going to be a strong pressure to look at meaningful and sensible sources of revenue. And we've suggested, for example, that the bank levy, which the banks were exempted from in 2015-16, should be looked at again. Similarly, the way in which North Sea oil has been taxed could be tightened, and various other proposals for making some kind of headway with public spending, which is going to be under tremendous pressure in the years ahead.
Do you think the average voter, Vince, is more likely to have heard of Ed Davey or Vince Cable?
I think they've probably heard more of Ed Davey. I mean, he's now appearing, as he rightly should be, in the national news, and I think will be rewarded. A very solid minister in the coalition, did a great deal to put forward the agenda on renewable energy, and highly credible figure.
A model answer, Vince.
Thank you.
Bill, what do you think? Do you think the Liberal Democrats are going to play much of a role in this campaign?
Pressing Vince on the substance of Lib Dem policy. I mean, the Lib Dems have never had a detailed programme for government because they know they're not going to win. But I think they are going to be the receptacle of protest votes. I think there's going to be significant tactical voting at the general election. And I could see the Lib Dems ending up with 50 or 60 seats at the end of this campaign because the Tories are so unpopular. And, you know, I know friends of mine who are members of the Labour Party who are considering, in seats where we're not contenders, but the Lib Dems are, considering voting Lib Dem in order to get the Tory MP out. So I almost think, regardless of what the Lib Dems do during the campaign, they're probably going to do well.
And how well will Jeremy Corbyn do in his seat of Islington North?
I think he will lose to the Labour candidate, but frankly, I think it's good news that he's standing as an independent because it really shines a spotlight on the strength of Keir Starmer's leadership. You know, this is a man who is ruthless, who expelled Corbyn from the Parliamentary Labour Party, eradicated the stain of anti-Semitism, and has removed Corbynites from standing for the general election and wrestled the Labour Party back to the centre ground. So I think Corbyn will lose, but standing as an independent, I think is good news for Labour.
An interesting point of view. Thank you very much, Vince Cable, Sir Vince Cable, for joining us down the line, and Bill Rammell here in the studio. After the break, following the death of the Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash last week, I'll be speaking to the Iranian human rights activist Lily Mu to delve into the reaction from around the world to this news and whether the event makes any difference to the people of Iran. Stay with us.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel. So the UK's most popular baby names have been revealed, with Noah and Olivia again topping the annual list. In at number 2 is Mohammed for boys. List is on the screen here. Number 3 for boys is George. Then it goes Olivia. Then it's Leo, Arthur, and so on. And for girls, so Olivia is number 1. Then Amelia, Isla, Ava, Lily, Ivy, Freya. There we go. Any of those names take your pick? Where's Dawn, by the way?
Well, yeah, there's on the Telegraph website, right, there's a really good way linked into this where you can actually put your name into the search engine, and these are names from 2022, by the way, and it tells you how common your name was. And I did put Dawn in, it's never been that popular. Can't think why. And there were only 5 babies named Dawn in 2022.
Really? That's surprising.
It's not a full confession here, right? My middle name, Mum, I hate you, is Maureen. Why is everyone laughing? My middle name is Maureen, which is a good old-fashioned East End name, and that has completely died out. There were no babies named Maureen.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Names like Keith, for example, Peter. Would you call a baby these days Keith or Ian? Baby Ian?
Without a doubt. I feel like I'm in a persecuted minority, you see, because later on, when I'm watching the boxing with Terry, Steve, Mick, Phil and Kev, right, and Peter, there are no such names featuring in this list. We are dying out. Our names will soon be gone forever, and I feel victimised by it.
Likewise, I should think we should start a campaign group and go on a protest march through London.
Cans, what do you make about Mohammed being number 2 for boys' names?
You know, I'm not going to comment on people. You know, they're going to call what they want to call. What I find interesting is people that do double barrel because they can't decide, and you know, a lot of people do that, and that's a bit difficult because I think you should just pick a name. You know.
I tell you names that are falling down the list though: Harry and Meghan.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the programme. The death of the Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi was greeted with grief by some and relief by others in Iran after it was confirmed that he'd been amongst those killed in a helicopter crash on Sunday. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who has ultimate authority in the Islamic Republic, expressed his condolences over what he called the bitter tragedy and declared 5 days of public national mourning. There have been mixed reactions to the death of President Raisi, who is remembered by many in Iran and beyond for presiding over brutal crackdowns on political opponents and protesters. To discuss the reactions from across the world and from inside Iran, I'm joined by the Iranian human rights activist Lily Mu. Seems we might have some problem with the line. I hope we're going to get to her in just a moment. So I'm interested in asking Lily Mu why President Raisi was known as the butcher of Iran. He was a man held responsible for crackdowns on dissidents, for many human rights abuses. And for that reason, of course, many people in Iran are not mourning his passing at all. But I'm interested to speak to Lily Mu about whether his death makes any difference at all to the people of Iran. I'm hearing some sounds from down the line. Lily Mu, are you there?
Hello.
Oh, great to see you.
Hello, good afternoon.
My
apologies for the terribly wobbly image of mine.
Don't worry. Don't worry. It's what you say that matters to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Would you like to tell us, Lady Mu, why was President Raisi known by some as the butcher of Iran, the butcher of Tehran?
He was the butcher of Iran by that definition because he executed more than 30,000 Iranians within a space of weeks from one another at a very, very young age. And he was an uneducated cleric who only went to school up until 6th grade. He is a shame to Iranians. He was a shadow of death on the population of Iran, and he executed without any remorse. He is the butcher of Iran.
Who were these people that he was executing? What had they done? What, in his eyes, was their crime?
Majority of the people that they murdered were either young students or this young activists who didn't want the Islamic Republic to come into power in 1979, or they had lost the revolution to the Islamic Republic. So a lot of them were from the Tudeh party, the communist Marxist party. A lot of them were from the Mujahideen at the time. And a lot of civilians who were completely unaffiliated with any political background or any activism. They just executed to set an example.
The 30,000 figure that you've quoted just there, what is the source of that? What is the backup? How do we know that that's a real figure?
Those figures are public knowledge. The Amnesty International already has all of that.
OK. Now, does the death of President Raisi make any difference whatsoever to the people of Iran?
Absolutely. First of all, it breaks my heart to say this, that Iranians are rejoicing at the death of another person, but they are rejoicing the end to a murderer. And that is to be recognized. They are not rejoicing death, they are rejoicing an end to a murderer's reign. He was a murderer. People are happy he's gone. People are looking forward to a future for Iran where the Islamic Republic will be no more. And we're getting there much closer every day to that goal. Iranian people haven't stopped fighting against the Ayatollahs. They haven't stopped fighting against this regime. And they're not going to stop fighting until the entire regime is dismantled. It's just that it happened, but one of the enemies is gone out sooner than expected.
Even if, in your view, justice has been done with his death...
Justice hasn't been done. I'm so sorry to cut you off there. Justice has not been done for him. He did not get to go to a court. He has been called in the international courts, the international tribunals here in London. The perpetrator of murders for the Auburn of the November of 2019 massacres that I spoke to you about in our previous interview, 3,500 Iranians were murdered at his hands recently. This is current history, not the 1980s. And he did not get any justice for that. He did not go to any court. He did not get any accountability. He is just gone.
I absolutely accept your correction, and thank you for making that. But what I was going to say was that with his removal, does it change the balance of power in Iran? Does it make reform or change any more likely?
Reform is not something that the Iranian people are looking for. Change is on its way, though. The Islamic Republic will be dismantled. The people are working very hard at that. And the regime has already fallen, is hollowing from within. It's hollowing from within. That is why we have so many officials in one helicopter.
Do you suspect foul play in this case of the helicopter accident?
Who knows? It's the Islamic Republic. Nothing they do is legal. Nothing they do is based on international law. Everything they do is they do as they go on their own whim. Who knows?
So whilst you said a moment ago that you don't like to celebrate anybody's death, tell me what this death has done to the morale of the people in Iran who want to change the regime.
It has boosted the morale highly. There's a huge boost in Iran. But I have to speak to you about something, Michael. What happened in London on Friday was appalling. The regime supporters, mullahs, clerics from the Islamic Republic itself, came into London, went into an Islamic center, and they mourned the death of the murderer, the butcher of Iran. And when Iranian dissidents held a peaceful protest outside of that memorial, dancing and rejoicing, which is their own. You're right. They were beaten up by people, members who were there. Police was available. Police was there. This happened in Alperson Road in London, in Wembley. And the police did not investigate this. They watched the whole massacre unfold, and only they went to attend to some of the wounds. 5 ambulances were involved. Multiple people, members of the public, from the British public, Iranian dissidents, were injured. A woman was kicked in the face numerous times. What happened in the streets of London on Friday is what happens to Iranians when they stand up to the Islamic regime inside of Iran. And now we have that happening in London, and the police is not even investigating this. I want to say one thing, this is shameful. What kind of a future for the UK are we headed to?
Lily Mu, you have ended there with a very, very powerful point. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sorry the picture quality was poor, but I want to assure you that we heard you very loudly and clearly. We're going to take the break to the news now. After the break, I'm going to be talking to Dawn Neeson about her programme, and we're also going to be talking about the stances of the various political parties in the general election on gender and trans issues. I'll be speaking to the feminist author and journalist Julie Beidel. But first, news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Thank you so much, and my deepest apologies for this wobbly.
Michael, thank you. It's 12:30. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. Compulsory national service for 18-year-olds will come into force if the Conservative Party wins the general election. The Prime Minister says young people will be given a choice between 12 months in the armed forces or 1 weekend a month volunteering in their community. It's hoped the scheme would help unite society in what Rishi Sunak called an increasingly uncertain world. The new scheme, which comes on the first weekend of election campaigning, has sparked a mixed reaction from voters.
It's a good enough idea, yes. It is a good enough idea.
I wouldn't want to do that, really.
I've got a 15 and a 17-year-old, so I wouldn't want them to go myself.
I think it's a good thing, because there isn't a lot of stuff for 18-year-olds to do.
People should be allowed to do what they want to do, not be bullied into doing something that they don't want to.
Some of them need a lesson in life, don't they?
In Ukraine, at least 4 people are dead and dozens of others injured after Russian missiles hit a crowded DIY store in Kharkiv. According to the regional governor, 16 people are still unaccounted for after the bombardment, which left a crater several metres deep. Meanwhile, the Duchess of Edinburgh has written in the Sunday Times today about her recent trip to Ukraine, highlighting survivors' stories of war-related sexual violence. And the newly unveiled tallest roller coaster in Britain has come to a stop just a day after it opened. The Hyperia at Thorpe Park in Surrey is said to be the fastest in Britain and features Europe's tallest loop. But in a message posted to social media, the park says that due to unforeseen circumstances, the new roller coaster will be closed until Wednesday. The rest of the park remains open, and anyone with pre-booked tickets is eligible for a free return visit. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Michael will be back after this short break.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course, just 2 days later, it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, you know, England fans got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Will gender recognition be an issue in the general election? Annalisa Dodds, the Shadow Women and Equality Secretary, has said that she wants to strip out the futile and dehumanising parts of acquiring a gender recognition certificate. It seems that a simplification plan may be proposed, which would require sign-off by a single doctor. Kemi Badenoch, the current Women and Equalities Minister, said that Labour should allow professionals to do their job properly. Joining me now is feminist author and journalist Julie Bindel for her take on this. Hello, Julie. Thank you for joining us on GB News Sunday lunchtime. Have you kept track of the various positions of the political parties on gender recognition?
Yes, and quite frankly, none of them come out of this looking good. So back in 2015, we had the then Minister for Women, a Tory, Maria Miller, who suggested that we should, as her first job, in fact, enrol, look at the Gender Recognition Act of 2004 and update it so that any man could self-declare that he was a woman, be given a gender recognition certificate without any intervention whatsoever, and then be legally recognised as a woman. Of course, that would also work the other way round, but feminists are concerned about men self-identifying as women for obvious reason. The Greens are absolutely bonkers on this issue and referred to women as non-men, and they have been absolutely extreme in Scotland, in England, in Wales, where they have decided that the rights of men that identify as women should trump those of actual women. Labour, of course, where we have the likes of Keir Starmer, Annalise Dodds, decide that there is no definition of a woman that anyone can possibly pin down. Some men have cervixes, and as Keir Starmer said when he updated his position, still ludicrous. Yes, all right, I admit only 99.9%, or rather 99.9% of women don't have a penis. I mean, absolute craziness. And every other party, the Lib Dems, have bent over backwards to accept that men can be women, which is ridiculous. So none of the parties have been good on this. The Labour Party has sidelined the likes of Rosie Duffield, one of the only MPs that's ever spoken out about this, and she's been monstered and vilified for it. And the Tory Party, we have Penny Mordaunt, who herself is sounds just like any other trans rights activist. So I'm very concerned about it, but I'm also really hopeful that if it is an election issue, which it undoubtedly will, that it will be seen as the important issue that it is, not just about a tiny number of trans-identified people that only affects that number of people, but an issue that affects 51% of the electorate, of course, which is women.
My perception was that with the publication of the CAST report, there was a certain amount of scuttling to new political positions going on across the parties. Even the Scottish National Party was affected by the CAST report, particularly with its change of leader. So the things that you've just described, are they the up-to-date positions of the political parties, would you say?
Well, I wouldn't know. I mean, we've lost two leaders in Scotland, the SNPs that were, again, capitulating to the Greens on their absolutely bonkers policies on gender ideology. We know that that the next leader won't be able to put forward this position because various kind of disasters have ensued. We're also aware that the Tory party are trying to put through a more sensible view and saying, well, of course we understand what a woman is. But I'm sorry, a 2-year-old child knows the difference between male and female, what a man and a woman is. It's not exactly a radical position to say there are two sexes and that's the end of that, and that it's not the same as gender ideology. With Keir Starmer and with the Labour Party, who knows? Wes Streeting has rolled back. He used to shrill for the trans women are women crew. He was part of Stonewall. He took on that ideology. He said that he apologised to Rosie Duffield about the harm that she's suffered for just basically speaking the truth and being brave enough to speak out. So there has been some backtracking. There's been a little bit of virtue signalling and posturing, but so far, I don't know whether any of them will say, OK, enough is enough. If we are elected, or when we are elected, we will make sure that trans rights and the rights of men that claim to be women will not trump those of actual women and girls, that we will get rid of the notion that any man, whether he's a sex offender or not, should be in a women's prison or a women's changing room or a hospital ward or a rape crisis centre or a women's aid refuge. That's what we want to hear from politicians right now.
What about the Annalisa Dodds proposal, if that's what it turns out to be, that someone could achieve a gender reallocation certificate on the basis of a single doctor signing off? What is your view of that?
My view is it's as offensive as it's ridiculous and it's dangerous. This is self-identification, which is what Nicola Sturgeon was pushing, which is what the Greens have pushed. And what it means is that you would effectively be able to find any GP that signs up to this crazy ideology. You could go to a private GP, one of those that's also prescribing cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers at the moment, because there's no legislation to stop them from doing that. So all you would need would be a friendly GP who swallowed the trans Kool-Aid to sign off the fact that you, as a man, male-bodied, having had no surgical or hormonal intervention, is now legally a woman. And for the record, I don't think that that should be the system, whether or not a man has been through full gender reassignment surgery and hormonal treatment. I think across the board that a male-born person remains male, and the reason why it matters to feminists like me is because of the risk of male violence and the risk to the safety and well-being of women and girls. That's why we fought for single-sex spaces, laws and provisions right back before the 1970s, and we're in fear of losing them all now.
And I suppose it's quite hard to envisage how, if you have a gender recognition certificate, you could then be denied access to women's sport, for example, or denied your request to go to a women's prison if you happen to be a convict.
Of course. We have trans activists on Twitter, on X, constantly telling feminists and others that they are legally a woman. So shut up, because I have as much right to claim to be a woman as you do. Now, men already have rights. The reason why women fought for special laws and rights is because we were being harmed through our vulnerability in sharing spaces with men, or like back in the bad old days when we didn't even have public bathrooms to go into, so women tended not to go out or stay out very long. Look, not every man is a sexual predator, far from it, but enough are a risk to women that we fought for these rights. And self-identification, where a man can have a gender recognition certificate because he decides he's female, is a huge risk to women and girls, and it's blatant disrespect and an insult.
Thank you very much, Julie Bindle. It will be most interesting to see whether this is indeed an issue in the general election. Thank you. After the break, it will be time for our Taste of Britain section. We'll be celebrating World Baking Day. I'll be joined by the director of Lola's Cupcakes, Asha Budvig.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, for the rest of today, it's going to be a pretty mixed picture. Many of us seeing some further rain and showers, but there'll be some sunshine in between. All courtesy of this area of low pressure, and unfortunately it's not going to go very far during the rest of this bank holiday weekend, maintaining a rather unsettled theme. So for the rest of this afternoon, many of us seeing some rain and showers. The showers heavy in places, risk of thunder. There are various warnings in force from the Met Office as we go throughout the course of today. In any sunshine, though, it won't feel too bad out there, especially across the south. We'll see highs here reaching around 19 or 20 degrees. So into this evening, across Scotland, we see a rather cloudy and damp picture, especially across more northern areas. Further south, maybe a few brighter spells to end the day, but here we see the risk of some thundery downpours, so there are warnings as we go through the course of the evening. Northern Ireland also seeing the risk of a few thundery downpours, similar across parts of England and Wales, but across the south, the showers should start to begin to fade away as we head towards the end of the evening. So going into the rest of the night, many parts of England and Wales turning a bit drier and clearer, where across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland remaining quite cloudy here with some further outbreaks of rain. In the clearer skies, we may well just see temperatures fall into single figures, but further north generally staying above 10 degrees. So we start bank holiday Monday off on a fairly bright and sunny note across eastern and central parts of England. Elsewhere, plenty of cloud around and still some outbreaks of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Showers developing further south too, but these should be a little bit lighter compared to today. The main focus of any heavy and thundery rain will be across the far northeast of Scotland. Temperatures around average for the time of year.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Earlier this week, we celebrated World Baking Day, an occasion that unites baking experts and novices in a shared enthusiasm. People have been baking for thousands of years. In fact, the world's oldest oven was uncovered a few years ago, and that was dated to over 6,500 years old. Asha Budvig, the managing director of Lola's Cupcakes, joins me now to share some baked delights and to tell me all about the company. Asha, how lovely to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Programme.
Thank you.
And what a glorious display. I mean, colour is the great feature of that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have lots of flavours. I think that's something special about Lola, something for everyone, you know, whether it's fruity or chocolatey or nutty or, you know, things that are vegan or things like that. So, yeah.
Heinz used to have 57 varieties at one point. Any idea how many varieties you've got?
I think we've got like 3,000 different cakes. Not 3,000 different different flavours, but you can have a cake in about 3,000 different ways, which is one of our weaknesses as a company. But yeah, we have about 50 different flavours going for us, so we're almost close to Heinz, but not quite there yet.
Tell me about the cupcake. Is it an American thing?
So I think originally cupcakes came from a lady that actually tried to bake a cake in a cup because she didn't have a sort of baking tin. That's where sort of it founded. And people always think about America and red velvet because the red velvet cupcake definitely came from America. So I think, yeah, cupcakes did move from America about 15 years ago to the UK, and that's when Lola's around that time was started.
Really? Only 15?
Yeah, 15, 20 years ago. So I think when it sort of became sort of more of a hype and a bit special here in London and the UK.
I was first aware of cupcakes in a Simon and Garfunkel lyric, which I suppose is dated to the 1960s or 70s, probably 70s. And so the invasion has been quite recent. And tell me about your business.
Yeah, so well, we have lots of stores, certainly more across London. We have some around the UK. Everything's freshly baked, so we kind of our sort of pride is about the best ingredients, making everything fresh and making everything by hand. So we have a small team of about 30 different decorators that are piping away, just making all our cupcakes that we send out to our shops. And we're making sort of celebrations nice, giving people something as a nice gift if they want to take it to someone, or they're having some nice, afternoon tea, cakes at home.
So, for example, I don't know whether you can reach it. The box that's furthest from me.
Yes.
Would you like to try and reach that?
Yeah, this little one here. Yeah.
So, is that a variety that you would sell?
Well, this is just something that the bakery just put together for me. But customers can sort of obviously go into our stores and basically pick any sort of flavour they like.
And these are mini cupcakes.
These are mini cupcakes. So, like my favourite would be the chocolate hazelnut. I'm a massive chocolate fan.
Go on then.
You've got you want me to just eat it right now? I mean, I would eat it right now.
I want you to eat it right
That's
now.
fine. I'm very happy to do that.
One of the terrible things that happens on this programme is that I have to eat things in public.
Yeah.
And my guest doesn't. So let me watch you put chocolate all over your plate.
I'm used to eating, so this is fine for me. I'll just put that there.
Tell me what I have here.
You've got red velvet. That's one of the most famous cupcakes. So that's the red velvet base. It's got cocoa in the sponge. Then you've got this cream cheese icing, and then we drip some red velvet crumb on top. So that's the same sponge back on top. So cheers to you. And I believe, yeah.
Any thoughts about how to eat this on television without making a fool of yourself?
I mean, you can do it in one bite. I'd probably say on TV do 2 or 3 just in case. But hey, here you go.
You were wrong, I think.
What, one bite's better?
I think one bite might have been much better. That is so delicious.
Soft.
I'm loving the cream cheese.
Yeah, this is good. I'm going to finish mine in one more.
So has the mini cupcake become very popular?
It's a great thing because if you're having a small bite like us on TV, or if you're going to a party or small celebration, it's bite-sized, so it's not a big cake. It's nice to share as well, and you can have 2 or 3 flavours. So yeah, I think the tinies are a nice way to enjoy them.
We've been talking about National Baking Day. How easy is it for the amateur baker to bake a cupcake?
I think it's quite easy. You start with your sponge, and then you can make a buttercream quite simply. Butter, sugar, and a couple of ingredients. So I think it's quite simple. But if you want to do lots of different flavours, that's when it gets more tricky. And then you've got lots of people with dietary requirements, like they don't eat this, they don't have dairy and things like that. So I think that's where people turn to us, because it's very difficult to make a great gluten-free cake or a great vegan cake, or something that's going to go wow when you take it over. So yeah, I think baking, you also need lots of ingredients as well. So
You haven't got one with a candle in it, have you? It's my birthday.
Well, somewhere hiding here.
No.
And this is your home, not my home. There might be a slightly larger cake.
Oh, no.
With something, as I did hear it's your birthday.
I've completely blown the queue.
You have blown the queues.
Oh.
Maybe someone will quickly rush in with a large birthday cake with your wonderful name on it, but it's not here. It's not here yet.
All right.
So that's carrot. So as long as you haven't got any nut allergies to walnuts, then that's a great one. It's quite traditional.
I'm so lucky. I don't have a nut allergy, and I absolutely adore walnuts.
So you've got walnuts in there. You've got fresh carrot in there. You've got a little bit of cinnamon. It's one of my favourites as well, carrot.
Thank you.
You've got chocolate and raspberry tiramisu. Well, I'll let you. That's the same icing as you had on the red velvet. That's that cream cheese icing,
which I'm very fond of. So where does your business go next?
So we now send cakes nationwide. So it was really difficult. You can see these are really fragile, right? So we've always been in London and been in London for quite a while. And a couple of years ago, we started sending brownies through the post, through letterbox, before the whole COVID pandemic. And about a year and a half ago, we figured out how to send a fresh cake like the one that's going to hopefully arrive for your birthday very soon through the post. So we're now sending cakes, Scotland, Leeds, Newcastle, Manchester, everywhere, and that's because people are asking us, how can we have your cakes outside of London? Great that you have your bakery in London, and that's great, but how can we enjoy it? So that's where we're going.
And the patriotic question, why did we need to import American cupcakes? What was wrong with the domestic product?
I guess what's the domestic? Is it Mr. Kipling? Is it? I'm not sure. Are we allowed to start singing Happy Birthday to you? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Michael.
Thank you very much indeed, Dominic.
Happy
Producer.
birthday to you.
I'm sorry that I blew the whole surprise. I had no idea you were going to do this. I'm so sorry. I apologise. I think I probably need to ask Dawn, what's on your show?
Cake. I'll
You stay here,
still
Dominic.
be eating your cake. We've got a very political show coming up. We've got our Rachel Reeves live, got Ed Davey live, got Ian Duncan Smith live, and we're also talking about what to do when you get short measures.
Isn't it wonderful that we've got all these people during a general election who want to come on GB News Live on a Sunday?
On a Sunday,
fantastic.
absolutely, yeah. So, and we will obviously have more cake too, because if you don't have cake on a Sunday, it's not a proper Sunday.
But
it's a very special birthday.
So you're pointed in. It's not actually. I mean, it's just a regular.
No, it's a special birthday because your birthday's just 2 days after my mum's. So you're Gemini.
Yes, I am Gemini.
Yes,
Indeed, I am Gemini.
Yeah, you know what to say about them.
Look, they didn't run to a knife. There's nothing I can do. I can't actually penetrate this cake.
It's a fresh berry cake, so hopefully you'll enjoy it. You know, nice summer's day out there.
Asher, you're so kind. It's absolutely fantastic. Asher, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great show coming out. Dominique, thanks for organising this. Now, coming up, it will be Dawn Neeson, as we know. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been on the show today. I'm always so grateful when people come on Sunday lunchtime, and particularly when they come on and help me celebrate my birthday. So I'll be back in 2 weeks' time. I look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. What a wonderful display.
Aww. Cool. Well, enjoy your birthday and happy birthday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Well, for the rest of today, it's going to be a pretty mixed picture. Many of us seeing some further rain and showers, but there'll be some sunshine in between. All courtesy of this area of low pressure, and unfortunately it's not going to go very far during the rest of this bank holiday weekend, maintaining a rather unsettled theme. So for the rest of this afternoon, many of us seeing some rain and showers. The showers heavy in places, risk of thunder. There are various warnings in force from the Met Office as we go throughout the course of today. In any sunshine, though, it won't feel too bad out there, especially across the south. We'll see highs here reaching around 19 or 20 degrees. So into this evening, across Scotland, we see a rather cloudy and damp picture, especially across more northern areas. Further south, maybe a few brighter spells to end the day, but here we see the risk of some thundery downpours, so there are warnings as we go through the course of the evening. Northern Ireland also seeing the risk of a few thundery downpours, similar across parts of England and Wales, but across the south, the showers should start to begin to fade away as we head towards the end of the evening. So going into the rest of the night, many parts of England and Wales turning a bit drier and clearer, where across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland remaining quite cloudy here with some further outbreaks of rain. In the clearer skies, we may well just see temperatures fall into single figures, but further north generally staying above 10 degrees. So we start bank holiday Monday off on a fairly bright and sunny note across eastern and central parts of England. Elsewhere, plenty of cloud around and still some outbreaks of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Showers developing further south too, but these should be a little bit lighter compared to today. The main focus of any heavy and thundery rain will be across the far northeast of Scotland. Temperatures around average for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though.